I placed my order for a Climapod Virtue complete kit May 24th of 2022. And then I added a second door to the kit as a whole. And the other component I purchased from Climapod was the storm kit, which is just like a wire cable bracing. It's been a year that I've been using the greenhouse. That's not counting the building process. That is purely the beds were installed and planted. So I utilized it through last fall, through the winter, the spring, and the summer of this year. In that time, I have been able to see how it performs throughout those first seasons. And I wanted to take the time to go through the changes I made to mitigate some of the concerns that I had, why I made the choice to use the Climapod greenhouse. So come along with me while I go through what I ordered, why I chose this, compromises I made with that choice, any additions I made to mitigate some of those compromises, things that I don't quite enjoy about it, and then the things that worked for me really well. So the first thing I'm going to go through is what I spent on the kit, because I purchased a kit, so that came with all the components I would need to build this, mostly. So when I placed my order May 24th of 22, the kit I purchased is called the Climapod Virtue 9x21 Complete. Complete means it comes with the louvers, the fans, the auto opening window things, and shelving. And you'll notice that I don't have shelving installed. That is not because the kit didn't come with it, but because of how I'm using it, and I wasn't sure if I wanted the kit to install the shelving the way it's intended to. And that comes down to design and choice. So I deliberately chose to use the greenhouse kit this season without the shelves in place, mostly because of how I have things growing in here. So I'm planning on using this winter to decide if I want to install the shelving or if I'm going to continue using it without the shelving. Price-wise, the kit itself for that size, that series, and with the complete package, so all of those extra add-ons, came to $4,699, just the kit. Because of where I have the greenhouse placed in my yard, and I have garden to the west and I have garden to the east, I got 2 sets of doors because it was going to be, no matter which side I put the doors on, it was going to be really inconvenient for me to have to walk around. So for flow of air and for flow of movement, it made the most sense to me to have 2 sets of doors on the Climapod. The extra sliding doors cost $429. The storm kit was like $69.99, so $70. With flat rate shipping, which was some hundreds of dollars, I'll put it up on the screen with the order total. So the whole order came to $5,771.98. Shipping went really smoothly. Email communications were stellar. I did have to be at home in order to accept the shipment. The unloading process was very smooth. I didn't have any problems at all. Ordering, shipping, excellent. Now let's get into why I chose the Climapod. Hobby-sized greenhouses tend to be about 7 foot wide or 9 foot wide. That just tends to be the standard range. Your lengths are very often expandable. So I was able to purchase 2 extension kits that went with the Climapod Virtue series. And I purchased this size because it was about as big as I could go without purchasing a commercial greenhouse. And those run about $40,000 baseline for commercial size greenhouses. Never mind the fact that I'm on a suburban lot, which is just under an acre. Commercial greenhouses are also about 14 to 30 feet wide, so there's a fairly large difference between hobby-sized greenhouses and commercial-sized greenhouses. Both tend to be fairly expandable, but the width of it is not at all the same. So 9 foot tends to be about the limit of hobby-sized greenhouses, and then 14 to 30 feet wide for commercial greenhouses. And as much as I would love that much space in my yard, taken up by a greenhouse, that's kind of excessive, even for me. Why the Climapod? The other common recommendation for hobby greenhouses for regions like mine is a Riga greenhouse. Those tend to be about twice as much as the Climapod. Both of them are made from machined aluminum. The base structures look very similar. The warranty is comparable. Now, when I compare the Riga, a comparable Riga series, to the one that I purchased from Climapod, the doors do look a little bit better on the Riga, and the R value listed is much better. For me, the Climapod was a pretty easy choice because it was more reachable for my price point. The first compromise with my choice was by choosing to purchase a kit. I was compromising in that I wasn't going to put any of my own time and personalization into drawing, designing, and executing a greenhouse build. The mere thought of needing to sit down and consider all of the potential choices for how to build a greenhouse just stressed me out, and I was very afraid that I would forget some major component and just do it wrong. By purchasing a kit, everything was figured out for me, and that was a compromise I made to value my time over personalization, and in some ways, strength. We'll get more into that when I get into the things I don't necessarily enjoy about the Climapod. I spent the winter of 2021, prior to purchasing the greenhouse kit, researching what types of greenhouse structures I'd liked, what was common, what was accessible, the pros and cons between buying a kit and designing and building one of my own. All the research I did suggested that for my zone, which can get down to negative 30 Fahrenheit in the winter, I should get polycarbonate at 8 millimeters, double walled polycarbonate. You can get polycarbonate that's triple walled, and there's a whole separate video probably on the different types of polycarbonate and why you would make one choice over another. That was another reason I didn't design and build my own, is because the rabbit hole you can go down for that, no thank you. I didn't find any kits that had 8 mil polycarbonate. I found 6 millimeter as the most common, and because it's the most common, it's generally considered the best for most climates. Another compromise I made is that I chose not to quote and price out running electrical to the building itself. So anything that I was going to do as supplemental heat or any light, anything I wanted to put in there was going to have to be self-sustaining. So on my greenhouse, you'll see that I've got propped up along the side a solar panel that's connected to a geothermal tubing. And when I say it's geothermal tubing, it's a system I put in that uses the principles of geothermal. I didn't purchase a kit for that or anything. So additions I made to the greenhouse structure because of some of the compromises I had to make. Since the heat retention is not necessarily what I was hoping for, as far as doing the 6 millimeter polycarbonate instead of the 8 millimeter, I had to figure out ways that I was going to have backup plans, essentially, to have the appropriate temperatures at the gardening spaces that I have. So I utilized the principle of double cover. You can find this in Elliot Coleman's book. I think it's Winter Gardening. Another author that uses this is Nikki Jabbour. Both of those individuals are in zone 5. One of them is 5B, so almost zone 6. That is a little bit warmer than what I get down to. So while both of those authors are utilizing the principles of double cover successfully in their growing zone and able to get a whole bunch of different crops throughout the winter, partly through variety selection and that double cover of a mini greenhouse inside another greenhouse, basically, I'm a colder zone. I wanted to see what I could do to sort of nurse my crops along throughout the winter season and get winter vegetables. The other compromise is because I don't have the electrical hooked up, there was not going to be a way for me to necessarily easily plug in a greenhouse heater or something that would turn on and off as needed. So I have a 12-volt fan connected to tubing, and when we laid the groundwork for the greenhouse, I dug 6 feet down. I used landscaping rock that we'd ripped out from around the house as a drainage field underneath. Used field tile tubing, and I ran that underneath the ground, snaked it underneath the soil, and at 6 feet down in my area, it gets a steady 59 degrees Fahrenheit. By circulating air through that tubing, I'm utilizing the principles of geothermal heating. You'll also see this called ground air heat transfer, where you are sinking the heat from the greenhouse through that tubing into the earth, and at night it exchanges that heat and brings it back up into the greenhouse. In the winter, I run that fan constantly. Because I'm not trying to grow anything warm season in the greenhouse during the winter, this works for me. I'm really just trying to keep the greenhouse at or above 32. Throughout my first winter in the greenhouse, the beds didn't stay above 32. However, I didn't lose any plants. They were hardier than I expected. And that was utilizing the fan. That was also utilizing the principles of double cover. And on the coldest of nights, instead of having the frost fabric over the beds itself, I also did greenhouse poly over the top of the frost fabric. When I was researching the Climapod, I saw several individuals reviewing their experience, many of them positive. One caution I had observed, someone else's video said that their solar fans really only worked when they were in full sun. And because I have my greenhouse oriented going from east to west, I put all of my fans on the south side of the greenhouse. So they would always be able to get sun and run when they need to run. The windows operate on the auto opener expanding with heat, so direct sun wasn't necessary on that, and I have the window set up exactly as the diagrams request. For the fans, those are something you just cut into the side of the polycarbonate where you need them, and that I made a little template out of cardboard, and that was perfect. That went just fine. Another compromise I had to make, because I ordered 2 doors for the greenhouse, and this is because of how I have this positioned in my yard. I've got garden space to the west and to the east of the greenhouse. So having a straight walk-through path was really important to me, because no matter which way I would have oriented one door, I would have had to have walked around. This also helped with getting good airflow during the heat of the summer, because even though I can get down to -30 in the winter, I can get 100 or more in the summer. It's both extremes. So having adequate airflow in the summer was very important. I ordered 2 doors, but that means that the louver placement gets questionable. Because of how the air flows in my yard, it typically goes from east to west or west to east. There's not very many direct north and south breezes. It does happen, but not super often. The louver I also placed on an end wall. The depth of that gets a little bit questionable because I have it placed behind one of the doors, which means that when I open and close the door, I just have to be very careful about running into that. This isn't necessarily a flaw with Climapod or the Climapod greenhouse, but the choice of my placement was something to consider. So for things I don't like, I spent a small amount of money as far as greenhouses go on the kit itself. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's a couple of components that just don't feel sturdy. The material is aluminum, and once you had all the bracing as far as nuts and bolts, and you put in the polycarbonate and you silicone the edges in, there's a sturdiness to the structure. So I'm not going to tell you that aluminum bracing is not strong, but there are pieces of this that are plastic that don't work well for me. These peak covers, these are plastic. They just secure to the top of the greenhouse up there. Those fell off in the first strong wind, first on one side and then on the other, and I found them this spring. And that is, of course, a spot where I can lose heat in the greenhouse because heat rises. That's the peak of the greenhouse. There it goes. So aside from gluing these in, not sure how else I would mitigate that. But really didn't like how insecure this was. It fell off almost immediately. Next piece I didn't like is also a plastic piece. It's what secures the bottom of the doors to the track. And that was just really not great. So in the cold in particular, so during the winter season, I every single day had to adjust how that track was sitting. And several times it was loose enough and the wind was strong enough in my region that the doors were flapping in the wind. Also not a great way to retain heat. If your doors are open, there's no way. It's not happening. Plastic tracks work just fine in the summer. Spring and fall, also okay. During the winter season, no good at all. I mentioned that wind was a concern in my region. I've mentioned that several times on different vlogs. If this is your first video with me, then it's not uncommon for my region to get gusts up to the 45, 40 mile per hour, 50 mile per hour range. Steady winds, very commonly in the like 20s, sometimes low 30s. Not that every day is windy, but it happens often enough. Really often, honestly. Still days are more uncommon than common. And there's an openness to the west side of my greenhouse that, especially during the winter when there's not garden growing as a windbreak, the wind hits this wall of the greenhouse. And when you go back to aluminum components and how well that works, I need to figure out before the snows a better bracing for this west wall, because I had some bolts actually break off. So here, this is the west wall. That bolt has broken off. It fell down. This bolt up top was connected. It's not anymore. So this is the piece that connects the base that's cemented in to the frame that the rest of the polycarbonate sits on. So this is really not secure. Similarly, the bolt on the other side of the door behind this out of control watermelon vine also broke off. So this west wall, no longer super secure. Overall, the doors, also not my favorite. They are designed so that when you open them, they sit flush with the side of the greenhouse wall. So when I open this door, it goes flush against this arm, and that means the whole doorway is open when you have both doors open, which is great. I don't have a problem with that when it's open. But I mentioned that wind is a real concern in my area, and so I would rather have an overlap of even an inch on the sides so that wind doesn't come through. The kit does come with this little fuzzy seal to help prevent wind from slipping through, but in my region or zone, it's just not sufficient. The plan I have in the future to help that be less of a problem is I'm just going to build new doors that fit the track system. This winter, I'm probably going to put rebar as bracing straight up to keep it from flapping in the wind, because that's too big of a risk for me. Last winter, I hung up plastic across the doors and tucked it in underneath so that it, both inside and outside the doors, to reduce the amount of wind that was slipping through. The other thing that I did not do last winter that I think I'm going to do this winter is exchange the auto openers for the more manual openers, because those I can lock. The manual opens have like holes along the arm, so you can pull it shut and actually connect it to these little metal posts. So by hooking the arm into those metal posts, the window's actually secured shut. I tried tying them closed last winter after I disengaged the auto open section so it wasn't damaging itself if it tried to open while it was locked down. The ropes broke, often snow got through anyway, and then as the windows flap, I lose all my warm air. So that's my not so favorite parts of the Climapod. I don't think any of those are deal breakers. I think that in any other structure you have, your opening pieces of the structure for your greenhouse are going to be your weakest link as far as heat retention throughout the winter months. The other thing I don't enjoy about the Climapod is the instructions. The instructions were, I'm going to say, not what I'm used to or not what I was expecting. The instructions were difficult. And honestly, without Mark Tetch's videos that he has posted for his Colorado Springs build, I don't know that I would have made it. There were several points in this process where I sat down and cried because I was that frustrated and I needed an emotional release. It was awful. I am, I think, too used to instructions that are very chronological. And instead of going over the machined pieces, and the instructions sort of make assumptions that you know how all those machined pieces fit together. And I was expecting more of a, please take part A and attach to part B, and then move to step C, and I didn't get that. The build process itself was incredibly frustrating. And if I did not have a couple of friends that live nearby that were kind enough to spend, I think, 3 or 4 weekends, maybe more, with us figuring this out, we wouldn't have done this as successfully. There would have been more tears, and it probably would have been crooked. Yeah, it wasn't great. So instructions, not fantastic. The cons about this situation are the plastic pieces in particular, the lack of security between the actual base of the greenhouse and the small aluminum frame that you connect the rest of the polycarbonate structures to, and then the doors themselves just kind of get a no. I intend to be building my own doors to replace this experience because I don't like them. And their lack of security in the winter with that plastic piece at the bottom, that's just a hard line for me. I purchased a greenhouse primarily to extend my growing season and be able to do things in the winter. And so the lack of integrity on the openings, I really need to fix that. That can't be an ongoing experience for me. So let's go over the things that I appreciate about the Climapod greenhouse. Obviously, the first thing I appreciate is that I have a greenhouse now. The other thing that really worked for me is the fact that I did not have to spend my time and resources deciding how to build this, what measurements I needed, what sort of components would be necessary. The fact that I purchased a kit means there wasn't the risk that I was going to forget something crucial to the greenhouse's necessary function. So I did not have to risk designing and building something wrong because I just built with what I had. That was very convenient. And I do really want to thank Mark Tetchna for his video series that he and his wife put together. It was very, very beneficial, and I don't think we could have done this without seeing that setup. That was incredibly helpful. I'll put the link to that video series in the description below so you can see that if you're interested in that. The last thing that I really appreciated about this whole build process was that I was able to learn a bunch of skills by spending so much time putting together the base layer for this. Digging 6 feet down, I learned how to operate a mini excavator. I learned how to determine how far up you need to fill and tamp that dirt. Tamping is a shoulder workout I was not prepared for. If you have the means to rent one of those mechanical tampers, recommended. We got it done, but that would have been way faster. I learned how to pour a footing, how to put in cinder block and mortar that in. And I learned, most importantly, I think, how to ask for help. We have friends that live relatively close by, and they were willing to devote several weekends to coming over and helping us figure this out, which there were several times where I was at my wit's end. And having them here was incredibly, incredibly important. I want to encourage you, if building a greenhouse for your own area is something that you're interested in, I want you to go for it. This was not a project that I had prior experience in building at this scale. I did way more than I thought I was capable of doing in order to put this in. And I think that if I'm able to do it, then pretty much anybody else can. The things I would encourage you to do ahead of time is to consider your placement. I put mine far enough away that it was in full sun from the house, but not so far that I wouldn't want to walk out to it in the winter. Use case was very important for me because I wanted to use it in the winter. So consider the things that are important to you when you're setting your homes up, and then consider the things that you have the time, resources, and ability to put into it. If you have done a greenhouse build that you're particularly proud of, or you have lessons that you learned along the way that you think are valuable and you want to share, put those in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.